Hi, I'm Anna Marie Cox, and I told Dan I was going to lead with one of the many lines from this movie that contains a homophobic, racial, or ableist slur, sometimes all three. But I won't, because you're just going to have to trust me that it's terrible. And also, not a quote, but a fun fact, there are people in this movie that are clearly trying to look as though they were mentally disabled. So it's fun. It's a fun movie. That's what I'm trying to say.
Hi, I'm Daniel Dresner. Ow! My balls!
Okay. That elicited a genuine laugh to me, but it's only because it was Dan saying it. Welcome to Space the Nation, where we look at science fiction through the lens of...
Neutral mutants.
And eugenics. Today we'll be talking about Idiocracy, which is available to rent a lot of different places. In the next few weeks, well, we're going to be doing Space Giving, which is a fun annual tradition, and that'll be next week. And then the week after that is the premiere of Obama or Oh Bummer.
And we'll be talking about Emily St. John Mandel's Sea of Tranquility.
And we're just giving Obama like a gimme here.
Yeah,
like
this. If we don't like this one, there's going to be some. Then there's going to be some problems in terms of the weight of the Obama or Oh Bummer outcome. Yes.
Yeah. So Dan, people may have heard an ad or two before this show started, but there's an option for people that don't like ads.
It's true, Anna. I mean, we are all just in the custody of Carl's Jr. But if you don't want to be in the custody of Carl's Jr., might I suggest becoming a patron? If you go to patreon.com/spacethenation, you can become a patron for as little as $3 a month. There are lots of benefits. You get early access to the podcast. You get access to our AUAs. You get access to our awesome Discord channel, which is truly wonderful.
And now you get video content too, Dan.
Ooh, yes.
People get a video of this very recording session in all its glory.
And who wouldn't want to look at us, Anna?
I don't know. There's some people who watch it, but
oh God, really? Wow.
It's great that people do. It's a little more, if you're interested, and it's another reason to become a patron, it's a little more rough and ready than our radio edit, because it's edited by me and not a professional, where I just try to cut out the real rough parts. But so Dan, I can kind of see how you are, I guess. But how are you?
I'm doing well, Anna. I just came back from a trip to DC, in which I saw a lot of friends that I had not seen since the pandemic. That was quite lovely. And
was it for a conference?
It was for a conference, yes. It was not only for a conference, though, Anna, but it was for a conference, yeah.
No, I go to professional stuff to see people, too.
Yeah. And last night, my son took me to my first NBA game, which was kind of cool.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
First NBA game ever?
First NBA game ever. I've now done all four professional sports. I'm kind of happy about that. But
wow.
I'd never been to a basketball game before. And God, it was amazing.
I must have gone. Must have been to one. I think I went to a Timberwolves game.
Yeah.
Pretty sure.
It was worth it. It was it was a legitimately fun experience. Like sometimes, like there are sports where like you're like, well, why can't I just watch this on my TV? Like it's probably going to be more enjoyable that way. This was as if not more enjoyable to watch in person, which I was surprised by.
I find that most sports benefit from being there. I mean, it's a different experience.
Yes.
But usually I think if I want to watch a game, like I kind of will want to watch it on TV.
Yeah.
But the experience of going to a game, and I have to say it's one reason, even when I didn't like football, I enjoyed going to football games.
Right.
Because, especially fall weather, hot cocoa, like...
Oh yeah,
people
it's the whole
in the stands.
Yeah, or tailgating. It's a whole experience. The one thing I find interesting is that you wind up loathing commercials when you actually go to a lot, like either football or basketball or hockey. Like, it's like, why is no one doing anything for 2.5 minutes or 4 minutes? I don't get it. So it's very
loathing commercials. That is a pretty good segue
to why we are doing this.
To why we are doing Idiocracy.
So, listeners, this was my idea. I'm going to just get that out front. This is a movie that has a cult following and a very uncomfortable thesis for a variety of reasons, which we will get into. I had a second reason for doing this, which was it's been a long time since Anna rage texted me while watching something. And I do like to experience that about once a year or so. It is not unentertaining, is the way I will put it.
I hate this movie with the passion of 1,000 burning suns. Yes. I hated this movie. And it is good every once in a while, I think, for Dan and I to have a bump in the road.
Right.
in the way that we communicate about this show and about like what we want to do. Because if we always communicated perfectly, Dan, like then we wouldn't have a reason to keep working on our friendship. I don't know. Like we learn new things about each other when we disagree sometimes. How about that?
Let's put it this way. Erica pointed out to me that she could sub in for me for this episode, but it would be the most boring episode ever. Because it would just be the two of you agreeing endlessly about stuff. And,
And she's a therapist.
Exactly. Yes.
And I would just be using it for therapy. Like I'd feel like I needed to pay her at the end.
Fair enough. Yeah. Yes. No, but anyway, to be fair, Anna did not want to continue watching this. I pushed her a little bit on this one because of the movie's role that it has in the sort of current discourse. And it's not because I thought it's a great movie. We'll get to all of the problems, but that is why.
This will also move us smoothly to will this podcast ruin it for you? To which I say, I hope it does. Like, I think.
Yes, because the movie is still talked about a fair amount, and will this podcast ruin it for you? My answer is only if you really like the film and you don't want your gauzy 15-year-old memory of it to be changed.
Yeah, like it is interesting. I know we're going to have just lots to say about the cultural kind of context of this movie, but it is interesting to me that the fan base of this movie seems to have shifted over time.
Yes, which is also interesting, and we will talk about that in a second. But this is a nice segue to previous experience.
We're just segueing so beautifully. This is going to be like one of the fastest episodes we've ever done.
Oh, yes, it will be. All right, you have had no previous experience with this film, correct?
No, I will say this, which is I remember seeing the ads for it and I didn't like the premise.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually, this movie made me think a lot about my own, cultural biases. And, my life has been such that I have even more reasons to hate it now than I did. But I think also, I don't think I'm, retconning my own politics to say that I've always been uncomfortable with like liberal elitism about class and about like the kinds of people who like quote unquote like low class things, right?
Yeah.
And that was clear from the ads for the movie, right? Was like,
I don't know if as we'll talk about, the movie
poor
was
people
not
are dumb.
The movie was not promoted all that much for a variety of reasons.
No, but I remember it coming out, don't you? Or maybe I was responding to the cult nature of it.
I think it was the cult nature.
I remember seeing stuff about it and being like, "Oh, that's not for me."
So the movie gets talked about, but as we'll discuss, Fox did not promote this film at all.
No. You're right.
And that's the way.
Oh, look, it's another smooth segue.
Yeah. But I did want to say. I know I have to say my experience, which is I've watched it a couple of times, although it's been about 10 years probably since I really looked at it. And I will say that every time I watched it, it disturbed me a bit more for two weird combination things. The first is what we would refer to as the Big Trouble in Little China problem, which is the film is aged poorly in some aspects of it. But there's also a Children of Men aspect to it, in that there are parts of it that I think also the reason why it's occasionally talked about, or why it's been talked about. And this is where I think Anna and I are going to disagree some. But there are elements of it that I find a little disturbing because the movie works, I think, in a way that Anna disagrees with.
What I think is not prescient about it, but what it captures, let's say, is the ways that elite assumptions about people who are in, less, less comfortable financial straits, like the assumptions that all types of elites make about why they are there.
Right.
And also the assumptions that people make about why people, without financial insecurity, the decisions they make about having kids specifically. But that is what we will be talking about perhaps at length. So let's go to the story behind the story. Dan, I made you do it because I didn't want to spend another fucking minute thinking about this movie.
Yes, and this will be a short story behind the story, because I think what we would both agree on is one of the few things we'll agree on is it's the story after the story that's more interesting on this film. So Idiocracy is the brainchild of Mike Judge, the man behind Beavis and Butthead, Office Space, and King of the Hill. He came up with the idea, I think, in the mid-90s, and shot it mostly in Austin, Texas in 2004 for 20th Century Fox. Believe it or not, Anna, Fox didn't like the film. Terry Crews thought it was because of the satire of corporations. Regardless, Fox cut the FX budget after a very bad test screening and then released it in September 2006 with no screening for critics. Unsurprisingly, it earned less than $500,000 at the box office. Judge, however, predicted the film would have a cult following after its DVD release, and he was not wrong about that. It scored 71% on Rotten Tomatoes. The sort of consensus review was, to quote, frustratingly uneven yet enjoyable overall, Idiocracy skewers society's devolution with an amiably goofy yet deceptively barbed wit. The film earned...
Otto finds that deceptively barbed.
Yeah.
Right. Real subtle. It's like a barbed wit. That's what that is.
The film earned more than 20 times its theater grosses in DVD sales. There are also things that literally wound up being prescient in the film, in the sense of the film was shot in 2004, and one of the things they were trying to do was try to come up with futuristic clothing, because most of the film is set in the year 2505. Apparently, a local costume designer said, hey, there are these really ugly shoes that are about to be released. Why don't we use these for what everyone is wearing? And Mike Judge was like, well, what if these things become popular? And the costume designer was like, oh, please, that's never going to happen. And these shoes were Crocs, listeners. So there are Crocs that were shot in the film in 2004. By the time the film came out in 2006, they were a little more popular. Let's touch to the story after the story, though, which is the film has had, more life in the zeitgeist since then. In 2016, Judge and co-writer Ethan Cohen explicitly described Donald Trump's rise to the presidency as evidence that the film's predictions were coming true. Judge literally said, quote, I'm no prophet, but I was off by 490 years. And outlets across the political spectrum, from the Daily Telegraph to the Huffington Post, have made the Idiocracy analogy to Trump. However, what is interesting also is that more recently the film has been embraced by, I don't know, do we want to call it the alt-right?
I think alt-right is probably a pretty good, the trad right.
Trad right, yeah. But Joe Rogan and Elon Musk are big fans of the film. Rogan thinks that the opening bit, which we will talk about in a little bit, explains where we are as a country, and interviewed Judge about it last year. Mike Judge said to Rogan, I feel like the curse of the movie spread to the world. Musk tweeted last year that the opening scene of the film mirrors why his friends aren't having kids at the same rate that he is. Because he's been quite prolific in that area. Ironically, also earlier this year, CNN's S.E. Cupp compared the idea of a cage match between Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg to Idiocracy. So it keeps percolating up is one of the things
that also is sort of interesting. There's part of me that doesn't say anything is interesting about the movie, but sort of interesting is that it kind of tells on itself in a weird way, which is that the entertainment in it is actually kind of like the entertainment it satires.
In that it's obvious, or that
it's obvious and it's repetitive and it is about the people who are watching it to a certain degree. I don't know. Like the fact that I do think that the cage match idea is between Musk and Zuckerberg is very Idiocracy.
Yeah.
And to me, it's telling they wouldn't see that. They think of that as no, that'll be entertaining,
I think you pointed this out in a text message to me, but I think one of the reasons the film is in a weird way, Atlas Shrugged, in that the film it divides.
It is Atlas Shrugged meets Ow My Balls.
Ow My Balls. In that the idea is that there are a few people who have some intelligence. Everyone else is a moron, and it flatters the audience to think you're not the moron. So that is, and that can work to some. I mean, that is a way in which
it has worked.
It has worked. So yes, that's fair.
And it's like Ow My Balls, in that it's just the same fucking joke over and over and over. It's just, and it's watching people. It is mocking people's discomfort. It is just seeing people suffer and being like, oh, it's hilarious how they're hurting themselves. Look at that. Look at how they're being hurt. I just looked up Ethan Cohen's his filmography.
God. Yes, what else has he done?
One of his movies is My Wife is Retarded.
Are you serious? Oh, Jesus.
Yep.
Okay. Because again, it's interesting to me that Mike Judge is behind this, because you can argue it's
Office Space stands up to it, right?
And
Office
also
Space, Tropic Thunder. He also wrote Tropic Thunder, which is more problematic, but I think still has a lot to, because it's it's a satire of the people
Yeah.
in power.
Right.
That movie punches up. This movie is just like fist in the face going down.
I think the other weird thing about it is he's also responsible for King of the Hill and that's a TV show that does not talk down to its characters, that in some ways is dealing with the very characters that, make up, for lack of a better way of putting it, the lumpen proletariat that you see in this film. So that's why I can't shake this, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, I think King of the Hill is great. I think King of the Hill takes its characters very seriously.
It treats its characters with respect in a way that a lot of the characters in this film are definitely not treated with any respect.
I want to say one more thing about the making of it, which is I sent you a quote from Mike Judge that he, in an NPR interview of all places, where I think I will read from it, because I think it's another telling on himself kind of thing. So, Dan, I sent you a quote from Mike Judge and I think this goes in the story behind the story piece of this. And I think I agree. Yeah. So this is from Mike Judge in an NPR interview. I remember just answering a question in class, I don't know, like a math class or something, and saying, oh, I know, raise my hand, I know the answer, and it's blah, blah, blah. Being articulate and saying it, it's funny that he keeps saying, and just hearing someone behind me go, fag. And like, I was also thinking, okay, all those people in junior high who wanted to beat me up because I got answers right on quizzes and stuff. What if they were all running the world? What if that's all you had? And yeah, that's why I had stuff like just seeing airplanes crashing in the background. And so, yeah, it was, I guess it's kind of a dark vision, but it is, I don't know. I thought it was pretty funny. And I don't want to make fun of him saying, too much, because
there are people who do that, Anna.
Right. There are people who had to practice very hard over years to tone that down when they talk on
Anna's
camera.
Trained me so well.
You've gotten, like, you've improved in the number of times that you need to pause, like, because you are thinking more about how you sound, which is like, that's just how it works. That's totally fine. So I thought that quote was interesting because clearly hurt people hurt people.
Yes.
Like, that really, I mean, if Mike Judge is thinking about that 30 years later, it had an impact on him, and I don't doubt that. I actually had it in my head that you and I should talk about what it was like being a smart kid when we were in school, because I just never had thoughts like that. Like, and I think that might be a little bit of a gendered thing.
Yeah, no, I live for this way. I identify a little bit with what Mike Judge was thinking about, because I was called that and worse. And one of the things that got me through high school sometimes was the knowledge of, I would tell myself the story of where am I going to be 10 years from now, and where are these kids going to be 10 years from now? And that is a thing that an adolescent thinks to get them through a hard time. Yeah. Right. And then you grew out of that. No, know what? It's funny you mentioned that, because what's interesting is that I remember going back to a high school reunion, and I was thinking, okay, like I was going into it thinking, oh yeah, like I could see all these kids that bullied me, and like I'm really going to look forward to this, and so on and so forth. And I had a really interesting experience, because it turned out those kids had grown up as well. And they were not the assholes that they were, when they were 14 or 15. Let's be blunt, we're all assholes at that age. Yeah. And it was actually an interesting epiphany for me of like, oh, these people are more mature too. And it was actually a very heartwarming experience, strangely enough. So yeah, I remember that.
And I would say, and I think that there is an interesting gendered thing happening.
It's possible,
right?
Yeah.
Because in a way, also, you were called effeminate for being smart.
Sure.
And so when you're a woman and you're smart, where the criticism is located is you're ugly, you're not wanted.
Right.
Like, you won't ever have someone you won't get a boyfriend.
Yeah.
And that is hard to turn into, like, oh no, I'm going to get laid a lot someday or something. Like,
or if it is, that's I'm not, that could mess you up in different ways. Yes.
It's like, you don't turn it into, oh no, they're wrong, I'm going to show you someday.
Right.
Like, it just turns into like, gosh, I guess I better work harder for me.
Yeah.
Anyway, you know what? We're going to have to, we'll have a couple more things to get to. Yep. Damn it. Chekhov's what's it, Dan?
Chekhov's pimp. Anna.
And I just don't care. I decided not to participate in that particular part of the script.
I will say this: I had watched this film before. I didn't. To be clear, there's an after credit sequence which I don't think anyone even knows about.
Oh yeah, I did not watch that because I was just like, thank God this is over.
And that's why the pimp returns. So yeah.
Yeah. The one of the 3 people of color in the movie. Yeah, the pimp.
Speaking of which, let's get to the plot, Anna. Now,
the other people of color being a sex worker and the former porn actor
who is the president, to be fair. Yes, but okay. Let's get to the quick plot. Anna would not allow me to talk about this in all 4 acts, and I can't say as I blame her, so this will be a very quick entirety of the plot. Meet Joe Bowers, the most average person in the armed forces. Joe is ordered to participate in a hibernation experiment scheduled to last a year to see if the military can put its best soldiers on ice between wars, because sure, there are times of peace. The project commander recruits a prostitute named Rita as the female subject. For dumb plot reasons, Joe and Rita stay frozen and forgotten for 500 years. And things change in those 500 years, Anna. We see that in an opening which sort of explains that apparently uneducated and undisciplined folks procreate far more than educated professionals. The result is a world in which the number of dumb people begins to overwhelm the number of smart people, and those smart people focus all their energies on things like erectile dysfunction meds. By the time Joe and Rita wake up in the year 2505, everyone speaks with a crude patois, and there are garbage avalanches. Joe and Rita have a series of misadventures, which ends with President Dwayne Elizondo Mountain Dew Herbert Camacho making Joe Secretary of the Interior because by 2505 standards, he's the smartest person in the world. Joe is tasked to explain why no crops are growing, and he learns that the crops are being watered with Brondo, a sports drink. It's got electrolytes. He suggests water instead. After a near-run execution by a monster truck derby as punishment for the Brondo stock collapsing, the crops start to grow. Joe agrees to become Camacho's VP and marries Rita. Following Camacho's term, Bowers is elected president and pledges to reward smart behavior again. Okay, Anna, let's get into this. I am happy to list all the things in the film that have aged horribly. I confess, and this is where we disagree, I can't shake the fact that there are some scenes and details that do seem to echo where the culture has gone. And the one that always stands out to me is the State of the Union address, where Camacho is speaking and he's getting heckled by members of Congress, and which is something that then eventually came to pass.
All right.
But let's go back to that first scene.
Well, I mean, in some ways, like there's almost too much. Yeah. But like you said, like the patois that they use, it is described as a hybrid of quote hillbilly, valley girl, and inner city slang, and various grunts. So this movie gets away with so much simply by not having very many people of color in it. So that like what is stuff that has a history in racism, like IQ, right?
Yeah.
Just gets kind of passed over. Like, because the poor people and the dumb people that they're making fun of are on screen white, like the racism is kind of hidden. And then like, I mean, I guess I'll just use the words that they use, but you know, fag is like one of the most repeated words.
The odd thing, and the part that really, like this way, this word is often overused, but what made me literally cringe while watching it again was when the narrator used it.
Yeah.
That was the thing where I was like, I understood I'm not thrilled with the characters in context using it, but I kind of got that. But the narrator using it was weird.
The narrator using it is weird. It does raise, I mean, like it's funny because there are, I don't want to criticize the movie's like logic problems. Like that's kind of
which are several, yeah.
The least of my concerns. Although in some ways the logic of the movie gave me the holes in logic gave me the most pleasant, you know, reveries. Like I liked to imagine where all the queer people were in this future, and they must be on some island somewhere, like living very comfortably and happily.
Maybe
like little
they took over
socialist utopia, Hawaii, where they're like
sure.
just being smart, raising kids through surrogacy, like not having to endure any of this. And like part of me honestly just doesn't even want to get started because so much of this movie upset me. Like, and it upset me. I didn't dislike it. I did dislike it, but my primary reaction was like, this is painful. Like this hurts to watch. And some of it
It's
is my discomfort with watching people be humiliated. Like, I just don't
Mhm.
find that funny,
Mhm.
Like, there is one of the little details is that people have toilets in their seats. Ha ha ha. People like take shits while they're watching TV. Isn't that funny? And
Mhm.
I'm just like, I don't know. I don't think that's funny. Like, I
See,
don't.
this might be where we disagree. I found that amusing. I did. It's not like the funniest thing in the world, but like I was surprised the first time I saw it, and yeah, I kind of thought
And maybe,
it was funny.
and that's just like, I don't like a lot of bodily humor. I also didn't like people like, there is a lot, the classist stuff is uncomfortable to me. And
Hmm.
part of it is just that I, over the years, have been kind of trained to think about, well, why are things this way? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And the subsisting on junk food part is, people who are poor don't subsist on junk food because they want to necessarily, right?
Hmm.
Like, we have incredibly, like, we have food deserts, we have
I lived
subsidized
in we
sugar.
both lived in a food desert.
Yeah,
Hyde
right. Well,
Park was a
Hyde
food
Park.
desert when we were there.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
so, like, and also, like, it's cheaper to buy junk food than it is to buy other
yeah.
food. Like, the welfare state does not exist in this movie, in any form. And the opening, which is about like all the poor people having kids, like, honestly, the first thing I thought was like, these people probably live in the South where abortion has been outlawed. Like,
In the 2020s,
in the
yes.
2020s, and also where there's
Hmm.
like probably very poor access to birth control. And even if there is access to birth control and there is access to abortion, people have kids, like people who are in, struggling to survive financially. There are sociological studies I did, won't recapitulate here, but in my public policy track at University of Chicago, I studied abortion and like,
Hmm.
and specifically why young people have abortions. And one of the things isn't just that they don't have access, although that's part of it. There is a pretty well documented part of it that's that they want to be loved. They want to have
Hmm.
a reliable source of affection and a reliable relationship bond. And those people, those women, are correct to
Your
assume,
kids do love you, yes.
and that will last longer than their partnership will.
Mm-hmm.
That in this day and age, right? Like,
Yeah.
your sexual partner is more likely to go to leave you than your kid.
Hmm.
So this idea that, like, oh, just popping out kids, like, it's just horror. And also, it literally, this gets us also to the name, like the idiocracy, an idiot. And everyone
It's not
knows
subtle, Anna. Yes.
it's not subtle, and that's that's a eugenics term. Like, that is who
Hmm.
was sterilized by the state. And I'll remind people that sterilization of undesirables was like legal in California till pretty recently. Like, and also that, like, women who were imprisoned were also forced into sterilization procedures, like, because the state didn't want them having kids. Like, it's a little not more nuanced, but just like, it wasn't talked about it that way. But that is our history, and it's deeply uncomfortable. And then, Dan, I will try not to get too emotional, but I am a woman who has
Hmm.
chosen not to have children.
Hmm.
And this movie posits that, like, I am a selfish person for doing that. And I know that people with kids also get called selfish.
Hmm.
This particular movie did not
No, no, it
take
didn't.
that argument.
Also, I hate to say this, the woman in that opening thing looked a little like you.
Yeah.
It never occurred to me, but it's true. Like, she's redheaded, and yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
it's also like, it is not just selfish, but like, oh, it elitist. And like,
Hmm.
also, there is the man in that situation is coded as being kind of effeminate as well. Like, it's just, and
Coded as infertile, actually.
like,
Yeah,
literally infertile, and
impotent.
also
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
just like, let's say, a pussy. Like,
Hmm.
it's, the whole thing is just so uncomfortable. It's, and then all, like, the racism does pop its head up pretty frequently. There's also a very overly, to me, extended scene where, you didn't get into this, but the reason why it's not clear why the army chose a sex worker to be the person that they put in hibernation. They say
It
they
was, I
couldn't get an
believe that.
army.
Yeah, that didn't quite track, and I believe the explanation is supposed to be that the base commander or the research commander really got caught up
Friendly.
in the pimp life is the word.
Got
Yeah,
into
yeah.
the pimp life, and like
Yes, exactly.
that's gross. It's just gross. Like and there is just not a single thing in this movie that I did not laugh or smile like the entire time.
Again, this is the difference.
I will
There
say
are
one
things
thing.
that I laughed at. Yeah.
I will
Mhm.
say Luke Wilson, it is impossible not to make him uncharming. Like he is charming. Like he has a superpower of charm, you know? And he is somehow pleasant throughout the entire thing as he kind of muddles his way through this. And
Mhm.
that is indeed a superpower. Maya Rudolph does a lot with a little, I'd say,
No, she's a badly underwritten character. Like
but it's a
and I'll
pretty
talk about this in a bit. Yeah, but
terrible
she's fine. Yeah.
role.
Hmm.
And Terry Crews is charismatic, sure,
Oh yeah.
but the humor in the movie is again so much like the humor they're making fun of. Like it is like base level humor. Like in the monster truck thing, like the trucks are named like Dildoizer and stuff. Like
Right, and they all like yeah,
haha.
all of them are designed to yeah,
Like
all of them are
yeah,
slightly
and so
phallic.
like the
Yes.
homophobia there is like that's like it's something like a 13-year-old would do. Like,
Yeah.
see, it's humiliating to get, a dick in your car. Like that is really
Hmm.
humiliating, Dan, to have a truck shaped like a penis, penetrate your car. Like
I'm now just trying to think of like 26th century insurance contracts and so forth. Okay.
all right, you do have
You know
other
what?
things to say.
We do, but we'll be right back after this very important brand endorsement.
Indeed. And we are back. Oh, and that just brings us, I guess we shall like just sally forth and through. The only way out is through, Dan. Which means I have to ask you. I can't believe I'm asking you, but is there IR in this dumb fucking movie?
Anna, a pimp's understanding of
Oh god,
IR
Dan.
is different from a square's. And you know it's hard out there. I'm sorry, Anna. I'm sorry. I got too wrapped up. Got too wrapped up in the film. There is IR in this film. Some of it is pretty smart. Some of it is extremely dumb. Let's start with the dumb, which was the premise for the hibernation in the first place. The film was made in 2004, and the premise is that the United States needs to freeze its soldiers because they go to war so rarely. I have some very bad news for Mike Judge. That was not the problem in 2004. That has not been the problem for most of the post Cold War period. You can read books by either Nuno Monteiro or my colleague Monica Duffy Toft on the fact that the United States has deployed troops overseas in combat situations for the overwhelming majority of the post Cold War years. So, not really a problem. The other thing that is dumb, and this is something I think that keys on to what Anna said, which is the definition of smart. The equation of pure intelligence with smart leadership is a dangerous one to make. And I think weirdly and unintentionally, the film shows that there is actually considerable value in possessing local knowledge about a situation. It takes Joe pretty much the entire film to figure out how to navigate 2505, as the most educated person and ostensibly the smartest, human on the planet. Whereas, by the way, it takes Rita a grand total of 2 minutes to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And so, sure, intelligence is good, innovation is great, but that is not the only kind of skill set folks want or need in a leader. And indeed, we'll get to this a little bit later, but you can make the argument that Camacho is a better leader, given the voters than Joe would ever be. And it's actually very funny because Joe's last speech to Congress, Luke Wilson plays that very differently, where it's like clear he finally gets how he's supposed to behave, and that demonstrates that you actually need to know something about this situation. Now, the smart part about this, and I will defend this, which is the question of what is the nature of legitimate authority in the world. Weber classically suggested three types, right? Traditional, rational, legal, and charismatic.
Just doing
The
a
first
lot
one
of work
derives.
for this movie.
I am, but I'm sticking with it. The first one derives from history and kinship. The second from the rule of law and technocratic expertise. The third from individual leadership abilities. Weber presumed that charismatic leadership would eventually transform into rational legal modes to ensure stability. What Judge is suggesting is that if people crave different qualities than public goods, like, say, drama, then we can see a devolution from rational legal to charismatic with just the trappings of a rational legal bureaucratic structure, which I think we actually see in the film in the form of Stephen Root as the judge. And so we have a lot of authority figures in Idiocracy that just sort of play act at being technocratic, or we just see pure charismatic leadership like Camacho.
All right. Thank you for not going on. And Dan,
right,
I'm just going to cut to the chase here. You usually ask me about a critique of capitalism.
Yep.
I actually don't think there's really much of one. I mean, there's this really obvious one, like, oh, everything's branded. Oh, branding is bad.
Brought to you by Carl's Jr. Yeah.
I think that there is a very elitist, quote unquote, critique of capitalism that is just brands are tacky. Mm-hmm. Branding is tacky. And I think thinking like that allows people who don't live a life of overt branding to think like, I'm smarter and better, and I exist outside capitalism because I don't have brands on everything.
I would go further than that, Anna. Think about the brands that the movie is mocking. They're not elite brands.
You're right.
They are Carl's Jr. brands. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So there's just like what is that, like the quiet luxury? What is it that like the Succession supposedly started, which is this idea that your brands aren't showing, but everybody knows what brands you're wearing, right? That's still buying into the idea that brands have some worth beyond.
Right, of course,
And so that's missing. And also, like, capitalism actually benefits from having class, right? Like, capitalism wants people to have things to strive for and wants people to feel like they're superior to others. And that is missing here. Like, there is no upper class here, which on the one hand, part of me is like, well, if we do let capitalism just continue to run rampant and predatory, it is possible that we end up in a place where we're all degraded. But I think that need to have strata is pretty important for late stage capitalism to really function. Like, that need to feel like some people are better than others. And indeed, one way that happens is with race, right? Like homophobia, racism, all kinds of bigotry or something, that if we can feel better than others and consume in a way that is different from others, like, that is really great for this system. And then the other thing that I thought about is like why this isn't a critique of capitalism. I personify capitalism when I talk about it, and I do believe that systems are the problem, not people, for the most part, right? But there's a weird emptiness to like how, if it's just brands doing stuff, like, that's actually people do have to do stuff, right?
There is still some agency involved.
There's agency, and there are, at least in the world that we can foresee, people making decisions, right? Like at the top or at some technocratic place. And in this movie, there's no people making decisions. And there's an implication, actually. They talk about how the computer laid off people, right?
Right. Yeah. In the Brando
situation where, well, there's also, there's like the economics of like, would watering crops with water really tank the entire like Brando stuff? Again,
it's not the most tightly plotted film. Yes,
right.
Like, I grant you that. Yeah.
But so when the Brando, stank talks, like, actually that.
Actually, that's pretty funny.
Like, we'll keep that in.
The stank stock. Yes.
The stank stocks.
Yes.
The computer, it can't remember exactly. Like, the computer laid us all off. The auto.
Right. Yeah.
That's when I thought, well, maybe this is actually the Matrix. Like, that it's AI's running,
or
everything.
It's AI gone horribly wrong because what they've based it on is,
right. But that there's actually there is no one running this. Like, there is just somehow like this is perpetuating, this horrible degraded system for no one's benefit. Like, really, everyone is fucked up. I did look for progressive, salutary to progressive takes on this movie.
On Idiocracy, and there are some. Yeah,
there are some. They do decrease with time. It's interesting.
Right. No, I think you're correct that I think the progressive enjoyment of this film peaked probably around 2017. And now we're sort of in the conservative embrace of Idiocracy in the forms of Musk and Rogen.
I think it peaked around the time where, white liberals wanted to white upper middle class educated liberals wanted to think that Trump was not their fault, that they had nothing to do with creating a system in which Trump could come to power.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be that dumb people elected him. Poor,
Mm-hmm.
dumb people elected
I
him.
mean, do you think, I guess my question is, do you think Idiocracy is of a piece with like the what's the matter with Kansas kind of,
No,
takes?
I mean, no, I actually don't think so, because what's the matter
Okay.
with Kansas doesn't mean, Tom, my friend, Tom Frank,
Right. Yeah.
is from Kansas,
Mm-hmm.
and he doesn't see the people that vote for conservatives because of social issues as dumb.
No, he just sees them as making a choice.
They've made a choice, the choice
Right.
that was given to them. If anything, also, like, he's incredibly, critical of the Democratic Party for making that
Mm-hmm.
choice viable. I mean,
Right.
for leaving that choice to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
His argument is we need to make a class-based argument. We need to show these people that are voting for conservative politicians that that's against their self-interest, that they will benefit from unions, they will benefit from universal health care, they will benefit from these things, and that the people of Kansas are voting against their own economic self-interest because they've been convinced that, like, that you murdering babies is like the most important thing. What?
I guess my question is, and we don't have to talk about this too much, but I guess my question is that if you think that the working class is laboring under false consciousness, how is that different from the Idiocracy argument?
They're not idiots. It's different. Like, if I
Okay.
believe that someone is been given a false choice,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't know, I can't speak for Tom on this, but I do
Right.
believe that a lot of people that voted for Trump were making a false choice.
Mm-hmm.
But those are the options that the way that our democratic system, quote unquote democratic system,
Yeah.
works, is that's the choice that was presented to them,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, you have, like, Democrats kind of talking about stuff that doesn't relate to them, that doesn't they can't see as being a part of their world, and isn't trying to appeal to them. And of course, they've been hurt by, like, years and years of these policies. And, like, I think
Mm-hmm.
I believe if we had universal health care, like, you would erode a lot of the GOP base, like, because they would have more options, right?
This is where I'm skeptical. No, I'm sorry. I actually don't agree with this. Which is not to say that you might not be in favor of universal healthcare, but I think weirdly, the more that these sorts of economic issues are dealt with, the cultural issues wind up becoming more paramount. And so but this is not an issue we are going to settle
I
in
know
with
it's
talking about
not. I guess I
idiocracy.
just feel like, I mean, cultural issues are also important,
Yeah.
but it is, if we, that's because they're the same. Like, we're seeing the backlash to the GOP's position on abortion, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that's not, I think that's because, like, millions and millions of women don't think of that as a cultural issue.
Right. And that is absolutely correct. And I
And
think
I don't think,
by the
and
way, I
eventually, and
think
people began to realize that other kinds of things that have coded as cultural issues are not cultural, or even if they are, like, I'm, trans people's safety is not a cultural issue.
correct. And let me put it this way. I think what's happened is that it was thought about as a cultural issue right up until Dobbs, even if it wasn't. But like that's what, in other words, that causes this a sort of shift.
Yeah, and
And
so
we
what
have
I think is
gone,
successfully
yeah,
progressives
mhm,
have made the argument, and also women know, like, when
yeah,
that right was taken away,
mhm.
women did not think, like, oh no, that's a cultural issue that I've lost.
Right, yeah.
It was, oh
Okay,
shit. I mean, I do think there are conservative women that had an oh shit moment about it.
yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah,
oh no, what this means is that my daughter,
right.
like, might not get to have the life I would like her to live. And that's not a cultural issue. That's bigger than a cultural issue.
We've made this an enjoyable conversation on it, and you know why? Because we strayed really far from idiocracy.
That's right. That's right. And I mean, I do think this is an important issue. And I think also, I want to, I don't think elitism and bigotry are the split along party lines. I
Yeah.
think that Democrats have made huge mistakes in terms of, like, how they think about middle class
Mhm.
and and even, more struggling, like, financial people, even more dire financial straits. Like, I think the myth of the meritocracy has really hurt, like, neoliberal myth of the meritocracy has really hurt Democrats long term.
Hmm.
Like, I think we are self-flattering. I tweeted I texted you that
Yes.
like I think this movie accurately represents how Hillary Clinton thinks about poor people. And that's a little unfair. Like she did a lot of work,
Yeah, it is.
in Arkansas and whatnot. But it is how I think poor white people think that Hillary Clinton thinks about them.
That would probably be fair. Yes.
And I do think that Democrats have not done enough to disabuse people of that and to make policies that reflect that. And what has happened is we've had horrible crises come to demand attention along those lines. Demand attention be paid to things that used to be kind of like thought of as like, it's their problem. Things like the opioid crisis and things like Dobbs being repealed, where it's not a cultural issue anymore. It's like talk about like we need better addiction care. We need better care for people that don't have any other options. And, like the war on drugs is not a cultural issue.
Let's close. I would close on this thought, which is no. I the sincere way I would put it is that the thing about watching Idiocracy is that when you're watching the movie, obviously what's happening on screen is not happening to you, and so you're able to keep it at a remove. And in some ways, what you're talking about, yes, but what you're talking about is the same thing in that there are a lot of issues that I think up until recently technocrats never thought of as affecting them, and what's happening is it's beginning to affect them.
Yeah.
Do you like how I managed to bring all that together?
That's great. Do we want to do Discord notes? Because
we should.
Okay, we'll do Discord notes. And you know what? This movie is a discordant note. I'll just screech out loud for a while. Oh, you know what? I'll just yell. Ah! That's how this movie made me feel.
It's time for Discordant Notes. That's when the members of the patrons who are on the Discord ask us questions about the film, and we answer them in the podcast. We have one question. It's from Toasty Ken. How stable would the world of Idiocracy be, assuming that other countries were in the same state as the United States? And my response is, you would have to make that assumption, Toasty Ken, because if you didn't, there would be no more United States. It would get hoovered up. Canada would absorb.
What a wonderful utopian vision that is.
But most of it, Mexico would take other parts of it. And there would be the queer, utopia potentially in Hawaii.
Yeah.
I guess, it would be theoretically stable if the entire rest of the world did this, but I also suspect it would be pretty violent in a sort of performative violence way, which you see throughout the film. And that actually leads to the weirdly utopian element of the film, which is the presumption that these people did not blow the world up. Because that actually, if you really follow it to its logical conclusion, would be what would happen. It would not just be planes falling out of the sky. It would be nuclear missiles.
Yeah. Where are they getting the corn to make the high fructose corn syrup that goes in all the food that they're eating?
It's not entirely.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things I think that makes the movie incredibly mean-spirited is that they don't do the work of figuring out how this would happen. Because once you try to figure out what would actually is this something that could actually happen, you are forced to look at systemic questions that take it out of it's this individual dumb people's problem.
Right. And I don't think that's what Mike Judge was interested in when he made this film.
Oh, nope, not interested in. And again, weird. It's so weird that he can make the movies that he makes that are really good. The content that he makes, I don't know. I also didn't like Beavis and Butthead, but that feels different than this. I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't like Beavis and Butthead either, but I loved King of the Hill and I love Office Space, which is held up well.
All right.
Okay. Oh, wait.
Is pieces of it's Brondo raining.
Brondo. It's raining Brondo.
It's raining Brondo. All right.
It's the debris field. It's the stuff
we Brondo. Just singing in the Brondo.
It's the stuff we could talk about that we haven't talked about so far. Anna, do you have anything, or would you just like to get this over with?
I was looking at what I texted you.
I have a few positive things, so yeah, okay, go ahead.
Let's see. There's a lot of text here, Dan.
Yes, there were, Anna. There were many, many texts about this film that Anna sent to Dan.
You know what? Here's what I'll say is I really don't think I'm retconning my own kind of position here. But this is a debris field. This counts as debris field because it's something I've been thinking about a lot, which is that, I grew up in Texas and Nebraska. Mm-hmm. And when people have asked me, why am I fascinated with conservatives and conservative thought? And that is what I covered for a long time. I don't cover that more exclusively now, but I had really good relationships also with people on the conservative side. Mm-hmm. Now, a couple things. One is I have exactly one friend who went Trump of the people that I knew on the conservative side. And he went really Trump, and I don't talk to him anymore.
Yeah.
Actually, two. I'll say I used to be friends with Tucker Carlson. Yeah, like actually pretty good friends.
Wow.
But one of the reasons I think that I got along with those people is that I never assumed that they were not as smart as me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I
Right.
never assumed that the voters were not as smart as me.
Mm-hmm.
And I tend to feel like I think people can be mean and racist, and I think people can be wrong, and I think people can be misguided. But I generally think that people are acting out of a need of their own, like
Yeah.
whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that has come to me over time because like when I was in high school and in junior high, and when I was realizing that what my politics were, most of the people around me didn't have the same politics.
Mm-hmm.
And it never occurred to me that they were quote unquote idiots.
Right.
Like it I was interested in why they thought the way they did.
Mm-hmm.
I believe we talked about this briefly, maybe during during the Line with Wardrobe episode, which is like I joined a like Christian youth group for a while, like,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
and they were. I don't agree, but I never thought people that believed in taking the Bible literally were dumb.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't
Well,
know.
let me put it this way. I was a Republican for a long time, Anna, and I married someone who was not.
Yeah.
And spent most of my life being surrounded by people who are not. I am no longer a Republican, so maybe the answer is that I've been the one who's been
Well, like I
brainwashed or what
said,
have you. But
so
like,
I think it's interesting though
yeah,
the people that I'm really close friends with that were my friends back then, like stayed Republicans, except for the one who's now making millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. And you could ask questions: is he really a Republican?
that's a
Anyway, you have
topic
stuff
for a
that you
different.
want to say.
I
I will
do. I do.
go through my
I
text and see if I have anything.
Okay. I do want to say some things I actually liked about this film because again, I can't quite quit it, I guess would be the way to put it. First, I do love the idea that there's a Costco in 2505. There's an extremely large Costco. Costco is a great store. And so, like, I think it was the only brand that actually got some positive brand
Positive.
recognition
All right,
from.
sure.
Yeah, I really do. Second, I did like Stephen Root as the judge. And I'm going to point out that I want to know why Stephen Root, his hair was like Wolverine. It was a very odd thing, and I kind of want to see a version of X-Men where Stephen Root plays Wolverine. It was sort of a random thought I had while watching that. Third, Terry Crews actually is great as Camacho, and I think in some ways the better version of this movie would be one in which you had more characters like him that sort of was simultaneously of the milieu that Mike Judge is trying to portray, but also reveals a little kind of intelligence that perhaps Judge didn't realize he was having Crews portray, which I thought was fascinating.
I think
Yeah.
a better movie would just be a movie that looked in the structural
Mm.
issues. Like you could still make a movie about a, consumerist dystopia
Mm.
that that didn't place all the blame on people are dumb.
Sure.
You know.
And finally, the two bits that I did like and will always like. The first is the Fox News hit where yeah.
That is the one point in the movie where I was like, tracks.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
eventually they'll just have men without shirts on. Because the
Men without
woman
shirts.
could be on Fox Today.
Right. That's my point. Like that is the part where it's like, yeah, okay. Yep. That was pretty much
And that's not prescient. That's just like what Fox was like even back then.
It was what Fox was like back then, just slightly. Yeah. Yes. And also the museum, which was just horribly the museum trip at the end in which Charlie Chaplin, I believe, was the head of the Nazis. And yeah, I'm sorry, that's just funny. And then there was like a dinosaur that destroyed the UN or something. Yes,
the UN
it's
solved
stupid.
Every problem. That was an interesting.
Right. Like this way.
Like,
is it
version.
Dumb? Yes. Does that mean it's not funny? No, it's funny. I'm sorry, it is.
And I would say that again, sort of not prescient because people misread like the past all the time.
Right. Yes.
And that is a humor that has nothing to do with the movie, really. Like, it's just funny. Like, if you showed me a misreading of history, it's like bad lip reading or something.
Right,
like,
exactly.
If you showed me a misreading of history that had Charlie Chaplin being, mistaken as Adolf Hitler, like, yeah, that's funny. Yeah. Sure. I don't know if I actually laughed then, in part because this wasn't in your wrap up, and thank God it wasn't, because I'm so glad that we're not spending any more time on this. We're about to wrap up. But the time machine plotline.
Yeah, that was a bad one.
Yeah, because I'm like, from the beginning, I'm like, Joe should realize that whatever he's calling it, whatever the other guy is calling a time machine, probably not a time machine.
Yes, basically, yes. Yep.
All right. Now we're closing. I want to make very clear, I'm not mad at Dan. And that we have I think a very fruitful relationship in which we disagree about things every once in a while. And that it is actually, I think I'm going to say, do I not regret? I think we had a very good conversation. Let's say I regret having to watch the movie.
Fair enough. Yes.
But this conversation, like 99.9% makes up for it.
But listeners, I am banned from recommending something to Anna for at least a month, I think.
You know what's funny is like, they'll tell you personal. You can recommend whatever you want. It's just you gotta listen to me when I say I don't want to do that one.
Fair enough. Yes. You can hear us on other places if you want to reach us on social media. We are both on Blue Sky. I am at Dan Dresner. She is at Anna Marie Cox. Anna, I believe you are also on Instagram. Is that correct?
I am on Instagram, and I have a lot of stuff going on. My memoir workshop. If you're interested did you like hearing me talk about the personal stuff I talk about on this website? Or, on this website, I guess this is a website. If you enjoy hearing me talk about stuff that has to do with my life, then you may enjoy taking a memoir writing workshop with me, and that will start in January. And you can go to my website, which is
www.annamariecox.com. It's pronounced differently, spelled the same.
That is correct. And you have a Substack, Dan, and how I wish you had just saved your interest in this movie
to that Substack.
It's
called Dresner's World. Trying to defy predictions of Substack's demise. So far, I seem to be succeeding.
Next week, Dan.
Yeah,
it's vital reading right now.
Wow. Oh, I'm putting that on like as a blurb. That is great.
And dear listeners, actually, you should always read Dan, but Dan doesn't like it when business is booming, but business is booming, and Dan is a wonderful guide, through these terrible times.
And I'm going to say, if you haven't yet, please read Anna's cover story in the New Republic about whether or not we've all been traumatized by recent years, and I think also potentially watching this film.
All right, until next time.
Keep this channel open for more.